The lawyer's pen clicked against the mahogany table as my daughter Rebecca spoke the words that would change everything. "We don't need you anymore, Mother. Sign the papers and make this easy for everyone." But when I pulled out my phone and showed them the airline confirmation for my one-way ticket to Florence, their confident smiles vanished faster than morning mist. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Margaret Walsh, and at 72 years old, I thought I understood the people closest to me. I had built Walsh Properties from nothing after my husband Thomas died 15 years ago, transforming a small real estate office into a multi-million-dollar empire that stretched across 3 states. Every brick laid, every contract signed, every sleepless night spent reviewing proposals had been for them. My children. My legacy. The morning that shattered my world began like any other Wednesday in my corner office overlooking downtown Portland. Rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows while I reviewed quarterly reports, my reading glasses perched on the end of my nose. The coffee had grown cold in my favorite mug, the one Rebecca had given me years ago with "World's Best Mom" painted in cheerful yellow letters. How naive I had been to believe those words. My assistant Jennifer knocked softly before entering. "Mrs. Walsh, your daughter Rebecca is here with her husband and brother. They say it's urgent family business." The concern in Jennifer's voice should have warned me. In 15 years of working together, she had developed an uncanny ability to read people, and her instincts were rarely wrong. "Send them in," I said, closing the financial reports and smoothing my navy blazer. Family always came first, even when business demanded attention. That principle had guided every decision I had made since Thomas's death. Every sacrifice I had endured to ensure my children never wanted for anything. Rebecca swept into the office first, her designer heels clicking against the polished hardwood. At 38, she possessed the kind of effortless elegance that money could buy, but character could not. Her husband Derek followed close behind, his expensive suit unable to disguise the calculating gleam in his pale blue eyes. My son Michael brought up the rear, his usual easy smile noticeably absent as he avoided my gaze. "Mother, we need to talk," Rebecca announced, settling into one of the leather chairs across from my desk without invitation. Derek positioned himself by the window while Michael remained standing near the door, as if guarding against escape. The formation felt oddly strategic, like pieces on a chessboard positioning for checkmate. "Of course, darling, what's on your mind?" I gestured for them to make themselves comfortable, though something in the air felt charged with tension I could not yet identify. "Would anyone like coffee?" Jennifer just made a fresh pot. "This isn't a social visit," Derek interjected, his voice carrying an edge I had never heard before. In the 5 years since he had married Rebecca, Derek had always been respectful, even charming in his own way. This cold, businesslike demeanor felt like meeting a stranger wearing my son-in-law's face. Rebecca opened her leather portfolio and withdrew a stack of documents. "Mother, we've been talking as a family and we've come to some difficult decisions." She placed the papers on my desk with practiced precision. "It's time for you to step down from Walsh Properties." The words hit me like ice water. "Step down? I don't understand. The company is thriving. Our profits are up 18% from last year, and we just closed the Morrison development deal." "That's exactly the problem," Michael spoke for the first time, his voice tight with what sounded like rehearsed frustration. "You're 72 years old, Mother. You should be enjoying retirement, not working yourself to death in this office." I studied my youngest child's face, searching for the boy who used to build blanket forts in my office on weekends, who had cried in my arms when his first business venture failed, who had promised to always take care of his old mother. "Michael, since when do you think I'm working myself to death? Just last month you said I had more energy than people half my age." "People change their minds when they see someone they love making poor decisions," Rebecca said smoothly. "Mother, you've given everything to this company. Now it's time to let the next generation take over." The presumption in her voice sent a chill down my spine. "The next generation?" "Rebecca, you work in marketing for a tech startup. Michael, you've been unemployed for 8 months. Neither of you has shown any interest in real estate development." Derek moved away from the window, producing his own set of documents. "That's where I come in. I've been consulting with some associates about the best way to modernize Walsh Properties. With my background in corporate restructuring, I can maximize the company's potential. Corporate restructuring. The phrase hung in the air like a threat. I had heard those words before, usually right before companies were stripped of their assets and sold for parts. Derek, your background is in insurance sales. That was before I decided to pivot into acquisitions and development, he replied, without missing a beat. The real estate market is prime for disruption, Margaret. With the right leadership, Walsh Properties could triple its value within 2 years. I looked around at the three faces staring at me expectantly, and for the first time in decades, I felt truly alone. These were my children, the people I had sacrificed everything for, and they were sitting in my office talking about my life's work, like it was a problem to be solved. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said slowly, removing my reading glasses and setting them on the desk. You want me to retire and hand over control of my company to Derek, who has no experience in real estate development. Our company, Rebecca corrected sharply. Walsh Properties is a family business, Mother. It belongs to all of us. I built this company from nothing. Your father and I started with a single rental property and a dream. Every success, every achievement, every dollar earned has come from my work, my decisions, my sacrifices. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Nobody's questioning what you've accomplished, Mom. We're just saying it's time to let someone younger take the reins. Someone like Derek. Someone like Derek, Rebecca confirmed. Mother, you're not being reasonable about this. We're offering you a generous retirement package. You can travel, relax, enjoy your golden years, instead of chaining yourself to this desk. I picked up the documents Rebecca had placed before me, scanning the legal language that would effectively remove me from all decision-making authority in my own company. The retirement package she mentioned was indeed generous in terms of monthly payments, but it would strip me of all ownership rights and leave Derek as the sole controlling interest. What happens to Jennifer and the rest of my employees under this arrangement? Derek's expression remained impassive. Streamlining operations will require some difficult personnel decisions. We can't make promises about retaining staff that may not align with our new direction. Jennifer had been with me since the beginning, had worked evenings and weekends to help build Walsh Properties into what it was today. The thought of her being dismissed as part of Derek's streamlining process made my stomach turn. And what about the Morrison development? We're 3 months from breaking ground on a project that will provide affordable housing for 200 families. Affordable housing isn't profitable, Derek said bluntly. That project will be canceled in favor of luxury condominiums that will generate 3 times the revenue. The casual way he dismissed a project I had fought for 2 years to approve, a development that would provide homes for working families in a city.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Where housing costs were skyrocketing, revealed everything I needed to know about Derek's vision for my company. You've thought this through very thoroughly, I said quietly. How long have you been planning this intervention? It's not an intervention, Rebecca protested. It's a family meeting about what's best for everyone. Everyone except me, apparently. Michael finally looked directly at me, and I saw guilt flickering in his brown eyes. Mom, we love you. That's why we're doing this. You've given your whole life to this company. Don't you want to enjoy the time you have left? The time I have left. As if I were already dying. As if my life were effectively over at 72. I thought about my morning routine of reviewing market reports, my afternoon meetings with architects and city planners, the satisfaction of seeing empty lots transformed into thriving communities. They wanted to take away the work that gave my life meaning and replace it with golf and cruise ships. What if I refused to sign these papers? The silence that followed my question stretched uncomfortably long. Derek and Rebecca exchanged a look that confirmed my worst suspicions. This was not a request. This was an ultimatum. Mother, Rebecca said carefully, we've already spoken with some of your key investors. There are concerns about the company's direction under your continued leadership. What kind of concerns? The Morrison project, for one. Several major investors see it as a waste of resources. There's also the matter of your age and whether you're still capable of making sound business decisions. The betrayal cut deeper than I had thought possible. You went behind my back to my own investors. We did what we thought was necessary to protect the family business, Derek said. Margaret, you can sign these papers and maintain your dignity, or you can force us to pursue other options. But either way, change is coming to Walsh Properties. Other options. The threat was clear even without elaboration. They would challenge my competency, claim I was too old to run the company, tie me up in legal battles that would drain both my energy and my resources. Even if I won, the damage to my reputation and the company's stability would be irreversible. I stood up from my desk and walked to the window, looking down at the city I had helped shape over the past 15 years. Cranes dotted the skyline, reaching toward projects I had initiated, buildings that housed families because I had believed in taking risks other developers avoided. You said you don't need me anymore, I said without turning around. Is that really how you feel? Mother, that's not what we meant. Michael started, but Rebecca cut him off. What we mean is that we can handle things from here. You've taught us well. Now it's time to trust us to carry on your legacy. Carry on my legacy. The phrase would have been laughable if it were not so heartbreaking. Derek had already made it clear that affordable housing projects would be canceled in favor of luxury developments. The company culture I had built around community service and ethical development would be replaced by pure profit maximization. I turned back to face them, and something had shifted in my expression because Derek took a step backward. You're right about one thing. I have taught you well. I taught you that family comes first, that we support each other through difficult times, that we build something meaningful together. Exactly, Rebecca said, relief evident in her voice. So you understand why this is the right decision. I understand perfectly. I walked back to my desk and picked up the documents. For a moment, hope flickered in their eyes. Then I opened my desk drawer, pulled out a paper shredder, and fed the contracts through it one page at a time. Mother, what are you doing? Michael's voice cracked with panic. I'm making my own decision about my own life and my own company. I continued shredding until the last page had been reduced to confetti. You said you don't need me anymore. Well, I've decided I don't need people in my life who see me as an obstacle to be removed. Derek's face flushed red with anger. Margaret, you're making a serious mistake. We're trying to help you here. Help me by stealing my company and firing my employees? Help me by canceling projects that will house working families? Help me by treating me like an incompetent old woman who doesn't know her own mind? You're being emotional and irrational, Rebecca snapped, her careful composure finally cracking. This is exactly why you shouldn't be making important decisions anymore. The irony was stunning. They had ambushed me in my own office, attempted to force me to sign away my life's work, and now accused me of being irrational for refusing to cooperate with their scheme. Get out of my office, I said quietly. Mom, please don't do this, Michael pleaded. We can work something out. Maybe a gradual transition instead of immediate retirement. Michael, you've made your position clear, you all have. You believe I'm too old, too stubborn, and too out of touch to continue running the company I built. You've already approached my investors behind my back. You've already made plans to fire my employees and cancel my projects. The only thing left was to force my signature on papers that would make it all legal. We're still your family, Rebecca said, but her voice lacked conviction. Family doesn't ambush each other with lawyers and ultimatums. Family doesn't go behind each other's backs to undermine everything they've worked for. Family doesn't tell someone they're no longer needed. I pressed the intercom button on my desk phone. Jennifer, would you please escort my visitors out? They're no longer welcome in this building. Derek stepped forward aggressively. This isn't over, Margaret. You can't fight all of us forever. We'll find another way to make this happen. With or without your cooperation. I'm sure you will. But you'll do it without me. After they left, I sat alone in my office as the rain continued to drum against the windows. The silence felt different now, heavy with the weight of burned bridges and shattered relationships. My coffee had grown cold hours ago, and the reports on my desk seemed less important than they had that morning. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in months. Elena? It's Margaret Walsh. I know this is sudden, but I was wondering if that villa in Tuscany is still available for rent. My old college roommate's voice warmed with surprise and delight. Margaret, I was just thinking about you. Yes, the villa is available, but I thought you were too busy with business to take a vacation. Things have changed, I said, looking around the office that had been my second home for 15 years. I'm thinking about making some major changes in my life. How major are we talking about? Well, how do you feel about having a permanent house guest in Italy? Elena's laughter bubbled through the phone line. Are you serious? Margaret Walsh, the woman who hasn't taken a vacation in a decade, wants to move to Italy? I'm completely serious. In fact, I'm looking at flights right now. As I spoke, I opened my laptop and began browsing airline websites. The first available flight to Rome was leaving Friday evening. 3 days to arrange my affairs and begin a new chapter of my life. Elena, there's something else. I want to do more than just live in Italy. I want to invest there. Are there any development opportunities in your area that could use an experienced investor? Actually, there are several abandoned properties that could be restored into affordable housing for local families. The village has been looking for someone with vision and capital to help revitalize the area. Affordable housing. It seemed the universe had a sense of irony. Derek wanted to cancel affordable housing projects in Portland, while I could potentially create them in Italy. The symmetry was too perfect to ignore. Send me everything you have on those properties. I'm very interested. Margaret, what's brought this on? You sound different. I looked at the pile of shredded contracts on my desk, the remains of my children's attempt to push me into irrelevance. I've recently discovered that the people I thought needed me most actually believe they don't need me at all. It's been quite liberating. Well, Italy needs people like you. When can you be here? This Friday, if I can arrange everything in time. This Friday? Margaret, that's 3 days away. Elena, I'm 72 years old, and I've just realized I've been living my life for other people instead of myself. I don't have time to waste on gradual transitions. After I hung up with Elena, I called my attorney, not the family lawyer who had undoubtedly been consulted about Derek's plans, but a different firm that specialized in estate planning and international business law. James Morrison here. Mr. Morrison, this is Margaret Walsh. I need to schedule an emergency appointment to revise my will and establish some international business entities. Of course, Mrs. Walsh. When would be convenient? Today, if possible. There have been some significant changes in my family situation that require immediate legal action. I can see you at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Perfect. And Mr. Morrison, I'll need absolute confidentiality on this matter. No one, and I mean no one, should know about these changes until I'm ready to announce them. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of legal consultations, phone calls, and preparations. By 6 o'clock, I had accomplished more than I thought possible in a single day. My will had been completely rewritten, removing Rebecca and Michael as primary beneficiaries, and establishing a charitable foundation that would use my assets to develop affordable housing internationally. Walsh properties would be sold, with the proceeds funding the foundation's work in communities that needed investment and revitalization. Derek's vision of luxury condominiums and profit maximization would never come to pass. Instead, my life's work would continue in a form that honored the values he had been so eager to abandon. Jennifer knocked on my office door as I was packing personal items into boxes. Mrs. Walsh? I wanted to make sure you were okay after this afternoon. That seemed like an intense family meeting. I looked up at the woman who had been my right hand for 15 years, who had stayed late countless nights to help me meet deadlines, who had celebrated every success and weathered every setback alongside me. Jennifer, sit down. I have something important to tell you. She settled into the chair where Rebecca had sat just hours earlier, her face creased with concern. Are you all right? You seem different. I'm more than all right. I'm free. I continued placing photographs and awards into the box. Jennifer, how would you feel about a significant change in your career? What kind of change? The kind that involves learning Italian and helping me develop affordable housing in Tuscany. Her eyes widened. I'm sorry, what? I'm moving to Italy, and I'm starting a new venture there. I need someone I trust to help me navigate international business law, local regulations, and project management. Someone who understands my vision and shares my values. Mrs. Walsh, are you really asking me to move to Italy with you? I'm offering you the opportunity to help build something meaningful from the ground up, just like we did here. The pay will be better, the scenery will be spectacular, and the work will matter to people who actually need our help. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what I was proposing. What about Walsh Properties? What about everything we've built here? Everything we've built here is about to be destroyed by people who care more about profit margins than human dignity. I'd rather see it sold to someone who will appreciate its value than watch it be corrupted from within. When would this move happen? I'm flying to Italy on Friday. You would have time to think about it, arrange your affairs, and join me when you're ready. There's no pressure, Jennifer. This is a complete life change, and I understand if it's not something you're interested in. She looked around the office we had shared for so many years, then back at me with something like wonder in her eyes. Mrs. Walsh, in 15 years of working for you, you've never failed to surprise me. But this might be your best surprise yet. Is that a yes? That's a hell yes. We spent the next hour discussing logistics, timelines, and the practical details of relocating an entire life to another continent. By the time Jennifer left for the evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. The betrayal from my children still stung, but it had also forced me to confront a truth I had been avoiding. I had been living their dreams instead of my own. That night, I sat in my study at home, surrounded by photo albums and memories of the family I thought I knew. Pictures of Rebecca's wedding, where I had paid for everything from the dress to the reception. Photos of Michael's college graduation, the degree I had funded after his scholarships fell through. Birthday parties, holidays, family vacations, all financed by my work and motivated by my love for them. They had grown up believing that my resources were their resources, that my success was their inheritance, that my life was primarily valuable for what it could provide them. I had created this dynamic through years of saying yes to every request, every need, every want they expressed. The irony was that in trying to give them everything, I had taught them to value me for my money rather than my love. And now that they were ready to take control of the money themselves, they saw no reason to keep me around. My phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. Mom, I've been thinking about today. Maybe we were too hasty. Can we talk? Too hasty. As if ambushing me with lawyers and ultimatums was simply a matter of poor timing rather than fundamental disrespect. I typed back, "There's nothing left to discuss. You made your feelings perfectly clear." His response came immediately. "Please don't shut us out. We're still your family." Family. The word had lost much of its meaning after this afternoon's revelations. Real family didn't try to force you into irrelevance. Real family didn't approach your business partners behind your back. Real family didn't tell you that you were no longer needed. I turned off my phone without responding and returned to my photo albums. Tomorrow I would begin the process of selling my house, liquidating assets, and transferring my life to a country where I could start fresh. Where my age would be seen as wisdom rather than incompetence. Where my desire to help working families find decent housing would be welcomed rather than criticized as unprofitable. The next morning brought a call from Derek. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out over caution. "Margaret, I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday," he began, his voice smooth with false sincerity. "I want to apologize for the way we approached this situation." An apology implies remorse, Derek. Do you feel remorse for trying to steal my company? Nobody was trying to steal anything. We were trying to protect your legacy and ensure a smooth transition of leadership. By removing me from all decision-making authority and canceling projects I spent years developing, those were preliminary discussions, not final decisions. We want to work with you, not against you. I almost laughed at the transparent manipulation. Yesterday, I was too old and incompetent to run my own company. Today, I was a valued partner whose input was essential. The only thing that had changed was their realization that I would not cooperate with their original plan. Derek, let me save us both some time. I'm not interested in working with you, compromising with you, or negotiating with you. I'm done with all of you. Margaret, you're making an emotional decision that you'll regret. Think about what you're throwing away. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing to invest my remaining years in people and projects that align with my values. You and Rebecca made it clear that those values are outdated and unprofitable. Rebecca is devastated by the way things ended yesterday. She loves you, Margaret. We all do. Love. Another word that had been stripped of meaning by their actions. If this was love, I preferred honest indifference. If Rebecca is devastated, she has an interesting way of showing it. Yesterday, she told me I was no longer needed. Today, you're calling to apologize. Which version of your feelings should I believe? People say things in the heat of the moment that they don't mean. On the contrary, I think people reveal their true feelings when they believe they have the upper hand. Yesterday, you and Rebecca thought you had me cornered, so you dropped the pretense of caring about my wishes. Today, you've realized that I still have options, so you're back to being respectful. Derek's pause lasted long enough to confirm that my assessment was accurate. What do you want, Margaret? What will it take to resolve this situation? I want you to leave me alone. I want you to stop trying to manipulate me. And I want you to understand that your actions yesterday severed our relationship permanently. You're willing to lose your family over a business disagreement? I lost my family yesterday when they chose money over love. I'm simply accepting reality. After I hung up, I continued with the preparations for my move to Italy. The real estate agent arrived at noon to discuss listing my house. By evening, I had appointments scheduled with auction houses to sell furniture and art that wouldn't be practical to ship overseas. Each decision felt like shedding skin, releasing attachments that had defined my identity for decades. The house where I had raised my children, the office where I had built my empire, the community where I had established my reputation, all of it was being left behind in favor of something unknown but authentic. My phone rang again that evening. This time it was Rebecca. Mother, please don't do anything drastic. Derek told me about your conversation today. We can work this out. Rebecca, what part of "we don't need you anymore" was unclear to you? I said that in frustration. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. How did you mean it then? I meant that we're capable of handling more responsibility. That we want to help you by taking some of the burden off your shoulders. By removing me from all decision-making authority, by giving you the freedom to enjoy retirement without the stress of daily operations. The script was obviously rehearsed, probably written by Derek after his failed phone call earlier, but the words rang hollow because I had seen their true faces yesterday, had heard their real agenda spoken without diplomatic filters. Rebecca, you stood in my office and told me that affordable housing wasn't profitable. You supported Derek's plan to cancel projects that would house working families. You participated in going behind my back to undermine my authority with investors. These weren't heat-of-the-moment mistakes. These were calculated decisions that revealed your actual values. Mother, you're being unreasonable. I'm being realistic. You and Michael have made it clear that you see me as an obstacle to your ambitions. I'm simply removing myself from your path. Where are you going? Derek said you were talking about selling the house. I'm exploring new opportunities that align with my interests and values. What kind of opportunities? The kind that value experience over youth and purpose over profit. Mother, please don't make any major decisions without talking to us first. You're upset right now, and upset people don't think clearly. There it was again. The assumption that my resistance to their plans was evidence of diminished mental capacity rather than legitimate disagreement with their approach. Rebecca, I've never thought more clearly in my life. Yesterday you forced me to confront some truths I had been avoiding. Today I'm acting on those truths. What truths? That I've been living my life for other people instead of myself. That I've been trying to earn love through financial generosity instead of expecting it to be freely given. That I've been enabling people who see me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. That's not how we see me anymore, and they were prepared to force me out to take control of everything I had built. Elena poured wine from a bottle that bore her own vineyard's label, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. Margaret, are you telling me your own children tried to steal your business? Not steal, exactly. More like legally manipulate me into signing it over to them. Rebecca's husband Derek had lawyers, documents, a whole presentation about how I was too old to make sound business decisions. They ambushed me in my own office with papers that would have transferred all control to Derek while giving me a monthly allowance like some sort of incompetent dependent. And you refused. I shredded their documents and told them to get out of my building. The memory still carried a fierce satisfaction, even tempered by the pain of losing my family. Then I liquidated everything I could, rewrote my will, and bought a one-way ticket to Italy. Elena was quiet for a moment, swirling wine in her glass as she processed the magnitude of what I had described. Margaret, I'm so sorry. The betrayal from people you love and trust is devastating enough, but from your own children. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, but the realization that I had created the conditions for it to happen. I spent 30 years teaching them that my value was tied to what I could provide for them financially. I never required them to respect me as a person, only to appreciate me as a resource. You were being a loving mother. I was being an enabling mother. There's a difference, and I'm only now beginning to understand it. Elena reached across the small table to squeeze my hand. Well, their loss is Italy's gain. Now tell me about these development projects you want to explore. Are you serious about investing in affordable housing here? The change of subject was a relief. Dwelling on Rebecca and Michael's betrayal served no purpose except to perpetuate pain that could not be undone. Moving forward meant focusing on possibilities rather than losses. Completely serious. Elena, I've spent 15 years building luxury developments because that's what generated the highest profits. But the projects that gave me the most satisfaction were always the affordable housing initiatives, the ones that helped working families find decent homes in communities with good schools and job opportunities. Those are exactly the kinds of projects this region desperately needs. Rural Italy is dying, Margaret. Young people move to the cities because there's no affordable housing near jobs, and small towns are left with aging populations and crumbling infrastructure. Show me. Elena's tour of the surrounding area over the next 3 days revealed both the beauty and the tragedy of rural Tuscany. Medieval hilltop towns that should have been thriving centers of culture and commerce sat nearly empty, their ancient stone buildings abandoned or converted into expensive vacation rentals for wealthy foreigners. Local families who had lived in these communities for generations were being priced out by tourism and speculation, forced to move to cities where they could afford rent but lost connection to their ancestral homes. This is the Rossi property, Elena explained as we stood before a cluster of stone buildings that had once housed a thriving farming cooperative. 3 families lived here for almost a century, growing olives and grapes, raising children who knew every path through these hills. But when old Giuseppe Rossi died last year, his children couldn't afford the inheritance taxes. They sold to a development company that plans to turn it into a luxury resort. I walked through the empty buildings, my trained eye automatically assessing structural integrity, renovation costs, and development potential. The bones of the buildings were solid, the location was stunning, and the existing infrastructure could support a small residential community with minimal investment. Elena, what would it take to convince Rossi's children to sell to someone who would preserve the property's character while making it affordable for local families? Quote, money, unfortunately. The luxury resort offer is substantial, and the children need cash to pay the inheritance taxes and support their own families in Rome. How substantial? Elena named a figure that was significant but hardly insurmountable for someone with my resources. More importantly, it was a fraction of what Derek would have wasted on one of his luxury condominium projects in Portland. What about local employment? If someone were to develop this property as affordable housing, would there be enough work in the area to support the families who moved here? Actually, yes. The wine industry is growing, tourism needs service workers, and there's a push to revive traditional crafts and agriculture. The problem isn't jobs. It's housing that working people can afford. We spent the afternoon exploring 2 other abandoned properties with similar potential. By evening, I had filled a notebook with measurements, observations, and preliminary cost estimates. For the first time in months, I felt the familiar excitement of a challenging project beginning to take shape. Elena, I want to make an offer on all 3 properties. She nearly dropped her wine glass. Margaret, you've been in Italy for 3 days. Don't you think you should take more time to consider this kind of investment? I've been considering it for 15 years, ever since I started compromising my values to maximize profits. This is exactly the kind of work I should have been doing all along, instead of building overpriced housing for people who already had too much, while ignoring families who couldn't afford decent shelter. The local bureaucracy can be challenging for foreigners. There are permits, regulations, cultural considerations that might not be obvious to someone from outside the community. That's why I need local partners who understand both the regulatory environment and the community's needs. Elena, would you be interested in working with me on this? Not as a favor to an old friend, but as a legitimate business partnership. Elena's background in sustainable agriculture and community development made her an ideal collaborator, but I wanted to ensure our partnership was based on mutual benefit rather than charity. Margaret, I've been looking for ways to invest my vineyard profits in projects that would benefit the local community. This could be exactly what I've been hoping for. Then let's do it properly. I'll have my attorney draft partnership agreements that protect both our interests, while allowing us to move quickly on these opportunities. The next morning brought a call from Jennifer, my former assistant who had remained in Portland, to handle the liquidation of my assets there. Her voice carried excitement that translated clearly across the Atlantic connection. Mrs. Walsh, you're not going to believe the response to the Walsh properties sale. We've had 12 serious offers, including 3 from companies that specifically want to continue your affordable housing initiatives. That's wonderful news. Any offers from Derek or companies he's associated with? Actually, yes. Derek submitted an offer through a shell corporation, but it was substantially lower than the legitimate bids. I don't think he expected so much competition for the company. The irony was delicious. Derek had assumed that forcing me out would give him easy access to Walsh properties at a bargain price. Instead, my sudden departure had created a bidding war that would maximize the sale price while ensuring the company went to buyers who shared my values. What about my house? Sold yesterday to a lovely young couple who are teachers. They love the garden you created and promise to maintain it. The auction house is coming next week for the furniture, and I've arranged for several local charities to receive the pieces you designated for donation. Jennifer, you're a miracle worker. How soon can you tie up the remaining loose ends there? 2 weeks, maybe 3 if the paperwork gets complicated. Mrs. Walsh, I have to ask, are you really serious about me joining you in Italy? Only if you want to help me build something meaningful from scratch again. The projects I'm looking at here would provide housing for about 60 families, create local employment, and revitalize 3 different rural communities. It's everything we always talked about wanting to do but never had the freedom to attempt. It sounds like a dream job. But Mrs. Walsh, what about your family? Have they tried to contact you since you left? The question I had been avoiding finally surfaced. They've tried calling, but I haven't answered. Jennifer, they made their position clear. They didn't need me anymore, and I've decided to take them at their word. That seems harsh, even for people who treated you badly. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people who take you for granted is to stop enabling their behavior. Rebecca and Michael will be fine without my financial support. They might even learn to value relationships over money once they discover they can't manipulate me anymore. After the call ended, I sat on Elena's terrace with my laptop, researching Italian business law and property development regulations. The complexity was daunting but not insurmountable, especially with local partners who understood the cultural and bureaucratic landscape. My concentration was broken by the sound of Elena's voice carrying from inside the villa, speaking rapid Italian in tones that suggested urgency or distress. When she appeared on the terrace a few minutes later, her expression was troubled. Margaret, that was my lawyer in Rome. He said there have been inquiries about you from American attorneys, people asking about your whereabouts and financial activities. A chill ran down my spine, despite the warm afternoon sunshine. What kind of inquiries? Questions about whether you're competent to make major financial decisions, whether you might be suffering from dementia or other cognitive impairments. They're trying to build a case for declaring you mentally incompetent. The audacity was breathtaking. When direct confrontation had failed, Rebecca and Derek were apparently pursuing legal channels to achieve their goals. If they could convince a court that I was mentally unfit, they could force me to return to Portland and submit to their control. Elena, how serious is this threat? Can they actually force me to return to the United States? Not easily, but they could make your life very complicated. If they obtain a court order declaring you incompetent, it could freeze your assets, prevent you from making investment decisions, and potentially force you into some sort of conservatorship. Even though I'm living independently in another country and making rational business decisions? The legal system doesn't always reflect common sense, especially when families are involved. Your children could claim that your sudden departure from Portland and decision to invest in Italian real estate are evidence of impaired judgment. The irony was staggering. Moving to Italy and investing in affordable housing was probably the most rational decision I had made in years, but it could be twisted to appear irrational by people with financial motives for controlling my choices. What do we do? My lawyer recommends that you establish legal residence in Italy as quickly as possible, and that you undergo a comprehensive medical and psychological evaluation by Italian doctors to document your mental competency. How long would that process take? Several weeks for the residency paperwork, a few days for the medical evaluations. But Margaret, there's another consideration. If you establish legal residence here, it becomes much more difficult for American courts to exert jurisdiction over your affairs. But it also makes me an Italian resident for tax purposes, which could complicate my ability to invest in American properties or maintain financial accounts there. Exactly. You'd be essentially choosing Italy over America, not just as a place to live, but as your legal and financial home base. I thought about the life I had left behind in Portland, the social connections and professional relationships that had defined my identity for decades. Then I thought about Rebecca and Derek's lawyers trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could seize control of my assets. Elena, schedule the medical evaluations and start the residency paperwork. If my own family is willing to destroy my reputation and autonomy to get access to my money, then I no longer have anything worth returning to America for. Are you certain? This is a big step, and once you take it, reversing course becomes much more complicated. I'm certain. In fact, I'm more certain about this than I've been about anything in years. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, legal consultations, and property negotiations. The Italian doctors who evaluated my cognitive function were thorough and professional, conducting tests that would have been insulting if they weren't necessary to protect my autonomy from my own children's legal machinations. Dr. Martinelli, the neurologist who conducted the most comprehensive examination, was blunt in his assessment. Mrs. Walsh, you show no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Your memory is excellent, your reasoning is clear, and your decision-making process is entirely rational. Anyone who suggests otherwise is either misinformed or deliberately dishonest. Could you put that assessment in writing? I may need documentation to counter legal challenges from family members who disagree with my choices. Of course. But Mrs. Walsh, may I ask why your family would question your competency? You're clearly an intelligent, articulate woman making reasonable choices about your own life. Because my choices don't align with their financial interests. Dr. Martinelli's expression darkened with understanding. Yes. Unfortunately, I see this often with elderly patients who have substantial assets. Family members who mistake inheritance for entitlement sometimes resort to competency challenges when they can't achieve their goals through normal means. Meanwhile, the property negotiations were progressing smoothly. The Rossi family had accepted my offer for their ancestral property, relieved to find a buyer who promised to preserve its character while solving their financial problems. The other 2 properties required more complex negotiations, but Elena's local connections and reputation opened doors that would have remained closed to an unknown foreign investor. Margaret, I have to admit I was skeptical when you first proposed this partnership, Elena said as we walked through the Rossi property with an architect who specialized in historic renovations. But watching you work, seeing how thoroughly you research every aspect of these projects, I'm convinced you're going to transform this entire region. We're going to transform it, I corrected. Elena, this only works because you understand the community's needs and values. I bring capital and development experience, but you bring something far more valuable: credibility and trust with the people who live here. The architect, a energetic woman named Sophia, who had studied sustainable development in Germany before returning to her native Tuscany, spread building plans across a makeshift table in what had once been the Rossi family's kitchen. The structural integrity is excellent, she explained, pointing to load-bearing walls and foundation elements. With careful renovation, we can create 12 family units while maintaining the property's historic character. Solar panels can be integrated into the roof design, and the existing well can supply water for both residential use and community gardens. What about sewage and electrical infrastructure? The sewage system needs complete replacement, but we can install an environmentally sustainable treatment facility that will actually improve water quality in the local watershed. Electrical service requires upgrading, but the regional grid can handle the additional load without significant modifications. Timeline and budget? 18 months from permits to occupancy, assuming no major complications. Total cost should be approximately 60% of what you'd spend on comparable development in an American city. The economics were compelling, but the real attraction was the opportunity to create housing that working families could actually afford. Rent for the completed units would be set at rates that local service workers, agricultural employees, and artisans could manage without sacrificing other necessities. Sophia, what about employment opportunities for the families who move here? Is there enough local work to support a community of this size? Actually, yes. The wine industry is expanding rapidly, and several vineyards are looking for reliable workers. Tourism is growing, which creates jobs in restaurants, shops, and hospitality services. There's also a cooperative forming to revive traditional crafts, pottery, weaving, woodworking, that could employ skilled artisans. Transportation to other employment centers? Bus service to Siena runs twice daily, and there's talk of expanding it to meet demand from new residents. Many people also work remotely now, especially in technology and consulting fields. As Sophia outlined the development timeline, my phone buzzed with an international call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally I would have ignored it, but something prompted me to answer. Mrs. Walsh, this is attorney David Kim calling from Portland. I represent Rebecca Thompson and Michael Walsh in a family matter that requires your immediate attention. My blood pressure spiked at the formal, threatening tone of his voice. Mr. Kim, I'm in the middle of a business meeting. What do you want? Mrs. Walsh, my clients are concerned about your recent behavior and financial decisions. Moving to Italy without informing your family, liquidating substantial assets, and making large international investments suggest possible cognitive impairment that requires medical evaluation. I've already had medical evaluations by qualified Italian physicians who found no evidence of cognitive impairment. Would you like copies of their reports? Mrs. Walsh, we need you to return to Portland for evaluation by American doctors who are familiar with your medical history and family situation. Mr. Kim, I'm not returning to Portland, and I'm not submitting to medical evaluations demanded by people who tried to steal my company. Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate with this reasonable request, my clients will have no choice but to petition the court for a conservatorship hearing. They're prepared to present evidence that you're no longer capable of managing your own affairs. What evidence would that be? Your sudden departure from Portland, abandonment of business responsibilities, estrangement from family members, and reckless spending on foreign real estate investments. Every item on his list was either a lie or a deliberate mischaracterization of rational choices. My departure had been sudden but not impulsive. I had not abandoned business responsibilities, but had arranged for the orderly sale of my company. My estrangement from family members was the result of their betrayal, not my cognitive decline. And my real estate investments were carefully researched projects that would benefit both my financial interests and local communities. Mr. Kim, Please inform your clients that I'm establishing legal residence in Italy and will not be returning to Portland for any reason. Any further attempts to harass me or interfere with my affairs will be reported to both Italian and American authorities as elder abuse. Mrs. Walsh, you're making a serious mistake. Your family loves you and wants to help you. My family wants to control my money. There's a difference. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. Elena and Sophia were staring at me with concern and confusion. Margaret, what was that about? Elena asked gently. My children are escalating their legal campaign to have me declared mentally incompetent. They want to force me to return to Portland for medical evaluations that would presumably support their case for conservatorship. Sophia, who had been following the conversation despite her limited English, spoke up in heavily accented words. In Italy, we have saying, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Your children have shown you they care more for money than respect. Why do you doubt what they have revealed? Her simple wisdom cut through the complex legal and emotional layers of the situation with startling clarity. Rebecca and Michael had indeed shown me exactly who they were during that ambush in my office. Everything that had happened since, the legal threats, the competency challenges, the attempts at manipulation, was simply confirmation of truths I already knew, but had been reluctant to accept. You're absolutely right, Sophia. Thank you for reminding me that some situations don't require complex analysis. What will you do about the lawyers? Elena asked. I'm going to do exactly what I told them I would do. I'm establishing legal residence in Italy, and I'm moving forward with these development projects. If Rebecca and Michael want to waste their money on lawyers and court proceedings, that's their choice. But they're not going to intimidate me into returning to a life that made them rich, while making me miserable. That evening, Elena and I sat on her terrace with a bottle of her finest Brunello, watching the sun set over the Tuscan hills that were slowly becoming my new home. The beauty of the landscape was almost overwhelming, a stark contrast to the urban environment I had left behind in Portland. Margaret, I have to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Of course. Do you ever regret leaving Portland? Do you miss your old life, even considering how badly your children treated you? I thought about the question carefully, examining my emotions without the filter of pride or defensiveness. I miss the illusion of having a loving family. I miss believing that my children valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. I miss the sense of security that came from thinking I understood the people closest to me. But do you miss the reality of that life? The reality was that I was being used by people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. The reality was that I was building wealth for people who had no respect for how that wealth was earned, or what values guided its creation. The reality was that I was sacrificing my own dreams to enable other people's greed. And now? Now I'm free to build something meaningful. I'm free to invest in projects that align with my values. I'm free to work with people who appreciate my contributions rather than simply demanding more of them. Elena smiled and raised her glass. Then here's to freedom, and to the courage it takes to choose authenticity over comfort. As we toasted my new life, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for months. The legal threats from Rebecca and Michael were troubling, but they were also confirmation that I had made the right choice. People who truly loved me would not be trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. People who truly cared about my welfare would not be attempting to force me back into a situation that had made me unhappy. The next morning brought news that solidified my confidence in the choices I had made. Jennifer called with an update on the Walsh properties sale that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Mrs. Walsh, the final sale price was 40% higher than your initial asking price. The buyers are a cooperative of local housing advocates who specifically want to continue your affordable housing initiatives. They're even planning to name the company Walsh Community Development in honor of your work. That's wonderful, Jennifer. What about Derek's attempts to interfere with the sale? Completely unsuccessful. His shell corporation was exposed during the due diligence process, and the discovery that he was trying to manipulate the sale actually increased other bidders' determination to outbid him. I don't think he expected quite so many people to care about protecting your legacy. Any word about the legal threats? Derek hired a private investigator to track your whereabouts and financial activities, but my attorney says there's very little they can actually do as long as you remain in Italy and continue demonstrating competent decision-making. Speaking of competent decision-making, are you ready to join me here? I've found an apartment in Montalcino that would be perfect for you, and the projects are moving forward faster than I anticipated. Mrs. Walsh, I've been ready since the day you offered. I just finished my last day at the temporary job I took to stay busy while wrapping up your affairs. I can be on a plane to Italy next week. Having Jennifer join me in Italy would provide both practical assistance and emotional support as I navigated the challenges of building a new life in a foreign country. More importantly, it would demonstrate to any court that my decisions were not the product of isolation or cognitive decline, but the result of careful planning with trusted advisors. The following weeks brought an acceleration of both positive and negative developments. The Italian residency paperwork was approved with surprising speed, thanks to Elena's connections and my substantial investment commitments. The architectural plans for all 3 property developments received preliminary approval from local authorities, who were enthusiastic about projects that would bring young families back to aging rural communities. At the same time, the legal pressure from Portland intensified. Derek's private investigator had apparently provided enough information to support a formal competency petition, and Rebecca and Michael were preparing to present their case to an Oregon court. Margaret, my lawyer in Rome, says the American court case could be problematic even if you never return to Portland, Elena warned during one of our evening conversations. If they obtain a conservatorship order, it could affect your ability to access American bank accounts or conduct business with American companies. How much of my assets are still vulnerable to American court orders? About 30%. Mostly in accounts I haven't had time to transfer to Italian banks. The bulk of your wealth is now protected, but losing 30% would still be significant. And if I fight the conservatorship petition, you'd have to return to Portland for court hearings, which would put you back in their physical jurisdiction and make it easier for them to exert control over your movements and decisions. So my choices are to lose 30% of my assets or risk losing my freedom entirely. Those appear to be your options, yes. I spent a sleepless night weighing the alternatives, walking the grounds of Elena's villa under stars that seemed impossibly bright compared to the light pollution of Portland. The financial loss would be painful but not devastating. The loss of freedom would be intolerable. By morning, I had made my decision. I would write off the vulnerable American assets as the cost of buying my independence from people who had forfeited any right to influence my choices. Elena, please have your lawyer arrange to transfer whatever American assets can be moved to Italian accounts. Whatever can't be transferred, I'm prepared to lose rather than subject myself to my children's legal manipulations. Margaret, that's a substantial amount of money. Money I earned, money I saved, money I intended to leave to people who valued me for who I was rather than what I owned. If Rebecca and Michael want to steal it through legal technicalities, they're welcome to it. But they're not getting my freedom along with my cash. The decision brought immediate relief and long-term peace of mind. Over the next month, as Elena's lawyers worked to protect whatever assets could be salvaged and I focused on the Italian development projects, the wisdom of my choice became increasingly clear. Jennifer's arrival in Italy marked the beginning of the most productive and satisfying period of my professional life. Together, we threw ourselves into the complex task of transforming abandoned rural properties into thriving communities for working families. The challenges were substantial, but surmountable, and every obstacle overcome brought us closer to creating something meaningful and lasting. Mrs. Walsh, I have to tell you something, Jennifer said as we stood in the courtyard of the renovated Rossi property, watching the first families move into their new homes. I've worked with you for 15 years, and I've never seen you this happy. She was right. Despite the financial losses, the family estrangement, and the legal complications, I felt more alive and purposeful than I had in decades. The work we were doing mattered to people who needed it, the partnerships we had formed were based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency, and the future we were building honored my values instead of compromising them. Jennifer, I think this is what contentment feels like. I'd forgotten what it was like to wake up excited about the day ahead, instead of dreading the next crisis or manipulation attempt. Any regrets about leaving Portland? Only that I waited so long to do it. That evening, Elena shared news that brought both closure and vindication. Her lawyer in Rome had received a formal notification that the American conservatorship petition had been withdrawn. Apparently, Rebecca and Michael's attorney advised them that pursuing a conservatorship against someone who was demonstrably living independently and making rational business decisions in another country would be both expensive and futile. Elena explained. Your children have given up their legal campaign. What about the assets they were trying to seize? Most of them were successfully transferred before the court orders could take effect. You'll lose less than 10% of your total wealth, which is much better than we initially feared. The relief was profound but not surprising. I had been confident that living successfully in Italy while building a legitimate business would eventually undermine any claims of mental incompetence. Rebecca and Michael had presumably reached the same conclusion and decided to cut their losses rather than continue funding a doomed legal strategy. Elena, there's something I want to tell you, something I should have said months ago. What's that? Thank you for believing in me when my own family didn't. Thank you for welcoming me into your home and your country when I had nowhere else to go. Thank you for helping me build something meaningful instead of just profitable. Margaret, you saved me as much as I saved you. I'd been feeling useless since my husband died, like my knowledge and experience no longer mattered to anyone. This partnership has given me purpose and energy I thought I'd lost forever. As we sat together on the terrace where I had first arrived 6 months earlier, watching the lights twinkle in the hilltop towns below, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. My children had been right about one thing. They truly didn't need me anymore. But in trying to discard me, they had inadvertently freed me to discover that I didn't need them either. The woman who had stepped off the plane in Rome 6 months ago had been broken, betrayed, and uncertain about her future. The woman sitting on this terrace tonight was confident, purposeful, and surrounded by people who valued her contributions. The transformation had been painful but ultimately liberating. Rebecca and Michael had told me they didn't need me anymore, and they had been correct. But what they had failed to understand was that I didn't need people in my life who saw me only as a source of money, rather than a person worthy of respect and affection. They had thought they were rejecting me. Instead, they had set me free. The morning light streamed through the windows of what had once been an abandoned farmhouse, and was now the community center for our first completed housing development. I stood at the large wooden table that served as my desk, reviewing architectural plans for the 4th property we had acquired, when Elena burst through the door with an expression I had never seen before. Margaret, you need to see this. You. Then why did you bring 5 lawyers to force me to sign away my company? The question hung in the air without response. Rebecca could not answer because any honest response would confirm everything I had just said. I have to go, she finally whispered. But Mother, please don't shut us out completely. We love you. Then you should have thought about that before you decided you didn't need me anymore. Friday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, both literal and metaphorical. The rain had stopped, leaving Portland looking washed and new under brilliant sunshine. I stood at my bedroom window watching neighbors go about their morning routines, knowing I was seeing this view for the last time. My suitcases were packed and waiting by the front door. Jennifer had agreed to handle the house sale and furniture auction in my absence, with instructions to donate anything of value to local charities. The papers for the Walsh property's sale were with my attorney, ready to be executed once I was safely out of the country and beyond Derek's reach. The taxi arrived at precisely 10 o'clock. As we drove through the city toward the airport, I watched the buildings and landmarks that had defined my adult life fade into the distance. The Walsh property's logo on several construction sites reminded me of dreams achieved and abandoned, of a legacy that would live on in housing for working families even if my own family had rejected the values that created it. At the airport, I turned on my phone for the last time before boarding. There were 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages from Rebecca, Michael, and Derek. I deleted them all without reading them, then powered off the device and dropped it into a trash bin. Some chapters of life end with dramatic confrontations or tearful goodbyes. Others end with the quiet click of a phone being turned off and the gentle whoosh of airplane wheels leaving the ground. As my flight lifted off from Portland International Airport, I felt not sadness but profound relief. They had told me they didn't need me anymore. Now I was free to find people who did. The ancient stones of Elena's villa in Montalcino seemed to absorb decades of accumulated tension from my shoulders as I stepped out of the rental car. Cypress trees lined the gravel driveway like sentinels, their dark silhouettes stark against the golden Tuscan hills that rolled endlessly toward the horizon. After 36 hours of travel, delayed flights, and the surreal experience of burning every bridge that connected me to my old life, I had arrived at what felt like the edge of the world. Elena emerged from the villa's heavy wooden doors with arms outstretched, her silver hair catching the afternoon sunlight. At 74, she moved with the confident grace of someone who had found peace with aging, a stark contrast to the way my own children had treated my years like a disease to be managed. "Margaret, you beautiful fool," she said, embracing me with the warmth I had forgotten existed between people who valued each other for reasons beyond financial utility. "I still can't believe you actually did it. When you called about moving to Italy, I thought you were having some sort of midlife crisis." "More like a late-life awakening," I replied, breathing in the scent of lavender and rosemary that seemed to permeate the very air around the property. "Elena, this place is even more beautiful than the photos you sent. Wait until you see the sunset from the terrace. But first, tell me everything. Your phone calls have been maddeningly vague about what prompted this dramatic life change." As Elena led me through rooms filled with antique furniture and frescoed walls, I found myself struggling to articulate the events that had brought me here. The betrayal from Rebecca and Michael felt both intensely personal and utterly surreal, like a nightmare I had not yet fully awakened from. "My children decided they didn't need me anymore," I said finally, settling into a cushioned chair on the stone terrace overlooking vineyards that stretched to the medieval walls of Montalcino. "More specifically, they decided my company didn't need immediately," she said, breathless from running up the hill from the village. She thrust her tablet toward me, displaying an email that made my heart skip several beats. The message was from Michael, my son. But the tone was nothing like the manipulative communications I had received through lawyers over the past year. His words were raw, unfiltered, and carried a desperation that cut through my carefully constructed emotional defenses. "Mom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. But something terrible has happened and I don't know who else to turn to. Derek has disappeared with all the money from Dad's insurance policies and the funds from our legal battles against you. Rebecca is facing criminal charges for fraud, and I'm about to lose my house. I know I have no right to ask for your help after everything we did, but I'm desperate. The children miss their grandmother, and I realize now how badly we messed up. Is there any chance you could find it in your heart to forgive us?" Elena watched my face carefully as I read the message twice, absorbing the magnitude of what Michael was describing. "Margaret, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "In a way, I have. The ghost of a family I thought I knew." I set the tablet down and walked to the window, gazing out at the vineyards where several of our new residents were working the harvest alongside Elena's longtime employees. "Elena, do you remember when I first arrived here, and you asked if I ever regretted leaving Portland?" "Of course. You said you missed the illusion of having a loving family. Well, it appears the illusion has finally been completely shattered for everyone involved, not just me." I handed her the tablet and watched her expression change as she read Michael's plea. When she finished, she set the device aside and joined me at the window. "What are you thinking?" she asked gently. "I'm thinking that some people only discover the value of what they've lost after it's gone. I'm also thinking that Derek has proven to be exactly the kind of person I thought he was from the beginning. But what about Michael and Rebecca? Do you feel any desire to help them?" The question hung in the air as I considered emotions I had worked hard to suppress over the past year. Michael's message had awakened something I thought was permanently buried. Not love exactly, but a complex mixture of sadness, disappointment, and residual maternal instinct. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you about Derek that I never shared before. When he first married Rebecca, I hired a private investigator to run a background check on him." Elena's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You never mentioned that." "Because the investigator found nothing conclusive, just a pattern of failed business ventures and terminated employment that could have been explained by bad luck or personality conflicts." But there were also some irregularities in his financial history that suggested he might not be entirely honest about money matters. Did you share this information with Rebecca? I tried to, but she accused me of being jealous and controlling, of trying to sabotage her happiness because I couldn't accept her independence. So I backed off and hoped I was wrong about him. But you weren't wrong. Apparently not. It seems Derek spent the last year convincing Rebecca and Michael to pursue expensive legal actions against me, while he positioned himself to steal whatever money they could extract from the process. Elena was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of Derek's deception. So Rebecca and Michael weren't just greedy. They were being manipulated by someone who was using their greed against them. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it does explain some of it. Derek is a professional con artist who identified me as a target and used my own children as weapons against me. What are you going to do about Michael's message? Before I could answer, my phone rang with an international call from a number I didn't recognize. After months of avoiding communication from Portland, I had developed an instinctive wariness of unexpected calls, but something prompted me to answer. Mrs. Walsh, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Portland Police Bureau. I'm calling regarding a fraud investigation involving your daughter Rebecca Thompson and her husband Derek Thompson. My stomach clenched with dread and anticipation. Detective Martinez, what kind of fraud investigation? Mrs. Thompson has been charged with embezzlement from her former employer, and her husband is wanted for questioning in connection with several financial scams targeting elderly individuals. We understand that you were involved in legal disputes with both of them recently. I was the target of their attempts to gain control of my assets, yes. But I moved to Italy over a year ago to escape their harassment. Ma'am, we'd like to speak with you about your experiences with Mr. Thompson's financial schemes. It appears you weren't his only victim, and your testimony could be crucial in building a case against him. The idea that Derek had been running similar scams on other elderly people filled me with rage and guilt in equal measure. If I had been more persistent in warning Rebecca about his character, if I had shared my private investigator's findings more forcefully, might other victims have been spared? Detective Martinez, I'm willing to cooperate with your investigation, but I won't be returning to Portland to testify in person. That's understandable, ma'am. We can arrange for video testimony, or have Italian authorities take your statement locally. The important thing is documenting the pattern of Mr. Thompson's behavior. After providing my contact information and agreeing to a formal interview within the week, I hung up feeling both vindicated and sickened. My instincts about Derek had been correct, but being right about his character provided no satisfaction when it came at the cost of my children's welfare and other innocent victims. Elena, I need to make a decision about Michael's message, and I need your advice. What kind of advice? The practical kind. If I decide to help Michael financially, what are the legal and tax implications of transferring money from Italy to someone in the United States who's facing potential criminal charges? Elena's expression grew serious. Margaret, are you really considering sending money to the son who tried to have you declared mentally incompetent less than a year ago? I'm considering helping my grandchildren who had nothing to do with their parents' decisions and shouldn't suffer for them. That's a very different thing than helping Michael. Yes, it is. And that's exactly why I need legal advice about how to structure any assistance I might provide. Over the next 3 days, Elena's lawyers researched the complexities of international financial transfers to individuals involved in criminal investigations. The conclusion was that direct assistance to Michael would be legally problematic and potentially dangerous to my own financial security. However, establishing an educational trust for my grandchildren would be both legal and protected from seizure in any criminal proceedings. Meanwhile, I struggled with the emotional aspects of Michael's plea for help. The young man who had stood in my office a year ago, supporting Derek's scheme to steal my company, bore little resemblance to the desperate father who had written that email. But which version represented his true character? Was he genuinely remorseful, or was this simply another manipulation attempt triggered by financial desperation? Jennifer, who had become not just my business partner but also my closest confidant during our time in Italy, offered a perspective that cut through my emotional confusion. Mrs. Walsh, You've spent the last year proving that you can survive and thrive without them. The question isn't whether they deserve your help. It's whether helping them serves your own values and interests. What do you mean? I mean that you've built something beautiful here, something that reflects your commitment to helping families in need. If you can extend that same compassion to your grandchildren without compromising your own security or values, then maybe you should. But if helping them means exposing yourself to more manipulation and betrayal, then your obligation is to protect yourself. Her words crystallized the decision-making framework I needed. This wasn't about forgiveness or family loyalty. It was about acting consistently with the values that had guided my work in Italy. That evening, I sat down at my laptop and composed a response to Michael's email. The words came slowly, each sentence carefully considered for both its immediate meaning and its long-term implications. Michael, I received your message, and I'm sorry to hear about the difficulties you're facing. While I can't provide direct financial assistance to you or Rebecca, I am willing to establish an educational trust for your children that will ensure they can attend college, regardless of your current circumstances. This trust will be managed by independent trustees and can't be accessed for any purpose other than education expenses. If you're interested in this arrangement, please have an attorney contact my legal representatives in Italy. I hope you and Rebecca can rebuild your lives and learn from this experience. Margaret! The message was formal and limited, but it offered genuine help to the people who truly needed it while protecting me from further exploitation. More importantly, it demonstrated that my decision to prioritize values over emotions was not the same as abandoning compassion entirely. Michael's response arrived within hours, and its tone confirmed that my cautious approach had been wise. Mom, thank you for considering help for the kids, but we need immediate cash assistance to save the house and pay legal fees. The education trust is nice, but it doesn't solve our current crisis. Can't you wire emergency funds now and worry about the legal details later? Time is running out, and the children will be devastated if we lose the house. The familiar pattern of manipulation was instantly recognizable. Michael had ignored the substantial gift I was offering and immediately pushed for something more valuable and less protected. His focus on immediate cash and pressure to bypass legal safeguards revealed that his desperation had not necessarily led to genuine wisdom or remorse. I showed the message to Elena, who shook her head in disgust. Margaret, even facing criminal charges and financial ruin, he's still trying to manipulate you. Which tells me everything I need to know about whether he's actually learned anything from this experience. I replied to Michael's second message with a single sentence. The educational trust offer stands as described. There will be no emergency cash transfers. His response was swift and revealing. Fine, Mom. I should have known you'd use our crisis as an opportunity to control us even from Italy. Keep your money. We'll figure this out ourselves. The accusation that I was trying to control them by offering protected assistance to my grandchildren was so absurd that I almost laughed. Michael was facing the consequences of his own choices, yet he still blamed me for his problems and resented any assistance that came with reasonable safeguards. Elena, I think I just received confirmation that I made the right decisions all along. How so? Because someone who was genuinely remorseful and focused on his children's welfare would have accepted the educational trust gratefully. Someone who's primarily angry about losing access to easy money responds exactly the way Michael just did. The next week brought my formal interview with Detective Martinez via video conference. As I recounted Derek's elaborate scheme to gain control of my assets, I felt a combination of anger and sadness that surprised me with its intensity. Mrs. Walsh, based on your description, Mr. Thompson's approach with your family fits a pattern we've identified in at least 6 other cases involving elderly individuals with substantial assets, Detective Martinez explained. He appears to target people with complicated family dynamics and exploit existing tensions to position himself as a helpful mediator while actually manipulating all parties for his own benefit. Detective, how many other families has he destroyed? We're still investigating, but the financial losses to his victims exceed $2 million, and that doesn't account for the family relationships he's damaged in the process. The scope of Derek's crimes was staggering, But what disturbed me most was how easily he had exploited my children's existing resentments and entitlement. Rebecca and Michael had been willing participants in his scheme because it aligned with their own desires to access my wealth without earning it. Mrs. Walsh, there's something else I need to ask you about. We've discovered that Mr. Thompson has been using false identities to continue his scams since fleeing Portland. Is it possible he might try to contact you directly, perhaps posing as someone else or claiming to represent legitimate organizations? The question sent a chill down my spine. Detective, what should I do if he does contact me? Don't engage with him under any circumstances. Alert local Italian authorities immediately and contact me. Mr. Thompson is potentially dangerous when cornered, and we have reason to believe he's desperate enough to take significant risks. After the interview ended, I sat in the community center, feeling both vindicated and vulnerable. Derek's crimes had validated my instincts about his character, but they had also revealed how thoroughly he had manipulated my family relationships for his own benefit. Elena found me there an hour later, staring out at the hills where our housing developments had transformed abandoned properties into thriving communities. Margaret, you look troubled. How did the police interview go? It went fine, but it raised some uncomfortable questions about my own role in this disaster. What kind of questions? Whether I could have prevented other families from being victimized if I had been more aggressive about exposing Derek's character from the beginning. Elena sat down beside me, her expression thoughtful. Margaret, you tried to warn Rebecca about your concerns, and she rejected your advice. You can't force people to listen to information they don't want to hear. But I could have been more persistent. I could have shared the private investigator's report publicly, made it impossible for Derek to continue his scams. And Rebecca would have accused you of trying to destroy her marriage. Your relationship with her would have been severed years earlier, and Derek would have simply moved on to other victims. You can't save people from themselves, Margaret. You can only control your own choices. Her words reminded me of a conversation I'd had with Dr. Martinelli, the neurologist who had evaluated my competency during the early days of my Italian residency. He had mentioned seeing many elderly patients whose families challenged their autonomy for financial reasons, and his advice had been simple. You cannot change other people's character, but you can choose whether to expose yourself to the consequences of their choices. Elena, you're right. I did what I could at the time with the information and relationships I had. Derek's subsequent crimes are his responsibility, not mine. And your children's participation in his schemes is their responsibility, not mine. I taught them values, provided opportunities, and demonstrated ethical behavior for 30 years. If they chose to abandon those lessons in favor of easy money, that's a reflection of their character, not my parenting. The conversation marked a turning point in my emotional recovery from the family betrayal. Instead of second-guessing my decisions or accepting responsibility for other people's choices, I could focus on the work that gave my life meaning and purpose. 3 months later, our fourth housing development was nearing completion when I received an unexpected visitor. Jennifer came to find me in the vineyard where I was helping with the harvest, her expression mixing excitement with concern. Mrs. Walsh, there's someone here to see you. A young woman who says she's your granddaughter. My heart stopped. Rebecca's daughter Emma was now 16, old enough to travel independently, but young enough to be vulnerable to adult manipulation. Was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or another scheme orchestrated by desperate parents? Did she say why she's here? She said she wanted to meet the grandmother who builds homes for families in Italy. We walked back to the community center where I found a tall, serious-looking teenager sitting at my work table, examining the architectural plans spread across its surface. She looked up when I entered, and I saw David's eyes looking back at me. Not the uncertain resemblance I had imagined in the child I thought was Miles, but the unmistakable genetic inheritance that connected her to my son. Grandma Margaret, I'm Emma. I hope it's okay that I came without calling first. Emma, how did you get here? Does your mother know where you are? I saved money from my job at the bookstore and bought a plane ticket. Mom knows I'm traveling, but she thinks I'm visiting colleges in California with friends. The combination of determination and deception was so familiar from my own children's behavior that I felt a moment of déjà vu. But Emma's motivation seemed different from the financial manipulation I had experienced from her parents. Why did you want to see me? Because I wanted to understand why my parents hate you so much, and why you moved to Italy instead of helping us when Dad lost his job and Mom got arrested. Her directness was startling but refreshing after years of dealing with Derek's elaborate manipulations and my own children's indirect accusations. Emma, what have your parents told you about our relationship? They said you're selfish and controlling, that you abandoned the family when we needed help most. But my friend's grandmother showed me an article about your housing projects here, and it didn't sound like something a selfish person would do. I gestured for her to sit down, recognizing that this conversation would require careful honesty, balanced with age-appropriate explanations. Emma, your parents and I had a serious disagreement about money and control. They wanted me to give them my business and my savings, and I wasn't willing to do that. Why not? Isn't family supposed to help each other? Yes, but help and control are different things. Your parents didn't want my help. They wanted my money without my involvement in how it was used. Emma studied the architectural plans again, her teenage mind processing information that many adults would struggle to understand. These houses you're building, are they for poor people? They're for working families who need affordable housing. Teachers, shop clerks, farm workers, people who work hard but don't earn enough to buy expensive homes. So you're using your money to help strangers instead of helping your own family? The question was fair and deserved an honest answer, even if that answer might be difficult for a 16-year-old to fully comprehend. Emma, I spent 30 years helping your parents financially. I paid for your mother's education, helped with house payments, covered emergency expenses whenever they asked. But they never learned to manage money responsibly because they always knew I would bail them out. So you stopped helping them? I stopped enabling them. There's a difference between helping someone solve a temporary problem and constantly rescuing them from the consequences of poor decisions. Emma was quiet for several minutes, clearly struggling with concepts that challenged everything she had been told about our family dynamics. Grandma Margaret, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you miss us? Do you ever wish you could come home and things could go back to the way they were? The question pierced through all my emotional defenses and forced me to confront feelings I had been avoiding for months. Emma, I miss the grandmother I thought I was, and I miss the family I thought we were. But I don't miss being treated like a bank account instead of a person. What if things could be different? What if my parents learned to appreciate you for who you are, instead of what you can give them? Honey, people don't change their fundamental character just because they face consequences for their behavior. Your parents have had over a year to reflect on their choices, and based on their recent communications, they're still focused on accessing my money rather than rebuilding our relationship. Emma absorbed this information with the resilience that teenagers often display when confronting adult complexities. Can I see the houses you're building? I want to understand what you think is more important than helping your own family. We spent the rest of the afternoon touring all 4 housing developments, meeting families who had moved into completed units, and observing construction progress on the newest project. Emma asked thoughtful questions about costs, timelines, and community impact, displaying an intelligence and curiosity that reminded me of David at the same age. Grandma Margaret, these places are beautiful. The families seem really happy here. They are. For most of them, this is the first time they've been able to afford decent housing near good jobs and schools. How many families will you help eventually? If everything goes according to plan, about 80 families across all 4 developments. Emma did the math quickly. So you're spending millions of dollars to house people you've never met, while your own family is struggling financially. Emma, my family chose to reject my involvement in their lives. These families are grateful for the opportunity to build better lives for their children. That evening, Elena joined us for dinner at a small restaurant in Montalcino, where Emma charmed the staff with her attempts at Italian and her genuine appreciation for the local cuisine. As we walked back through the narrow medieval streets under a canopy of stars, Emma asked the question I had been dreading. Grandma Margaret, what would it take for you to forgive my parents and come home? Emma, forgiveness and reconciliation are 2 different things. I've already forgiven your parents for the pain they caused me, but forgiveness doesn't require me to expose myself to more of the same behavior. But what if they really changed? What if they proved they were sorry and wanted a real relationship with you? I stopped walking and looked at this remarkable young woman who was trying to heal a family that had been broken by greed and manipulation. Emma, if your parents genuinely changed their priorities and values, if they demonstrated consistent respect for my autonomy and decisions, if they showed interest in my life and work that wasn't connected to accessing my money, then I might consider rebuilding some kind of relationship with them. How would they prove that to you? By leaving me alone for at least 2 years and focusing on rebuilding their own lives without any financial assistance from me. By demonstrating that they can be responsible adults who don't need constant rescuing from the consequences of their choices. 2 years? Emma, when someone betrays your trust as thoroughly as your parents betrayed mine, rebuilding that trust requires time and consistent behavior. Words are easy to fake, but actions over time reveal true character. Emma was quiet for the rest of our walk, processing the reality that her hopes for a quick family reconciliation were unrealistic. The next morning, as I drove her to the airport for her return flight to Portland, she asked one final question that revealed wisdom beyond her years. "Grandma Margaret, are you happier here than you were in Portland?" "Much happier, Emma. I'm doing work that matters, living according to my values, and surrounded by people who appreciate my contributions. I haven't felt this fulfilled and content since your grandfather died." "Then maybe my parents were wrong to think you needed rescuing from yourself. Maybe they were." As Emma's plane disappeared into the cloudy sky above Florence, I felt a complex mixture of hope and sadness. Hope that at least one member of my family might understand the choices I had made, and sadness that it had taken so much pain and separation for anyone to see past the financial aspects of our relationships. 6 months later, I received a letter from Emma that began, "Dear Grandma Margaret, I've been thinking about our conversation in Italy, and I think I understand now why you had to leave. I've been watching my parents closely, and I see how they still blame you for problems they created themselves. I wanted you to know that when I graduate from high school next year, I'd like to visit you again, and maybe learn about your work in Italy. I think there are things you could teach me about building something meaningful, instead of just expecting it to be given to you." Her letter also included news that Rebecca had been sentenced to community service and probation for the embezzlement charges, while Derek remained a fugitive, facing multiple fraud indictments across several states. Michael had found a job in retail management and was slowly rebuilding his financial stability without any assistance from family members. The educational trust I had established for Emma and her younger brother had been activated, ensuring they would have opportunities for college regardless of their parents' financial struggles. But more importantly, Emma's letter suggested that at least one of my grandchildren was learning lessons about character and values that her parents had rejected. As I read her letter on the terrace of what had become my permanent home in Tuscany, surrounded by the sounds of children playing in the housing developments we had created, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with family reconciliation or financial success. Rebecca and Michael had been right when they told me they didn't need me anymore. What they had failed to understand was that being needed and being valued are completely different things. They had needed my money but had never valued my wisdom, my experience, or my love for anything beyond its financial utility. The families living in our housing developments valued what I brought to their lives, not just financial resources, but also vision, commitment, and genuine care for their welfare. The partnerships I had formed with Elena, Jennifer, and local community leaders were based on mutual respect and shared values, rather than financial dependency. Emma's letter was special, not because it represented family reconciliation, but because it showed that someone from my old life had finally understood the difference between being needed for what you can provide and being valued for who you are. The woman who had left Portland 18 months earlier in anger and pain had discovered something she hadn't been looking for: the difference between being indispensable and being appreciated. My children had made it clear that I was no longer indispensable to their plans, and in doing so, they had freed me to find people who genuinely appreciated my contributions. They had told me they didn't need me anymore, and they had been absolutely right. But what they had never understood was that the best relationships aren't built on need. They're built on choice. And I had chosen to invest my remaining years in people and projects that honored my values instead of exploiting my resources. As the sun set over the Tuscan hills I now called home, I realized that their rejection had been the greatest gift they could have given me. They had forced me to discover who I was when stripped of the role of family provider, and the person I had found was stronger, wiser, and more content than the woman who had spent decades sacrificing her own dreams to enable other people's entitlement. I poured myself a glass of Elena's finest wine and raised it toward the lights twinkling in the villages below, where families were settling into homes we had made possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build something meaningful, and new chances to prove that being discarded by people who never valued you is sometimes the first step toward finding people who do. They didn't need me anymore, and I had never been more grateful for anything in my life. Because when you're not needed, you're free to be wanted. And being wanted for who you are, instead of what you can provide, makes all the difference in the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.